Yeah, thanks for joining me, guys. I know for some of you it's even later than 7:30, and for anyone that lives on the Sunshine Coast, this is extremely late to be doing basically anything. So I appreciate that you're here, and I can see some faces and you're putting in some effort. Yeah, we might just wait a minute or so, otherwise we'll get started. Obviously, it's going to be me talking a lot, so hopefully that entertains you enough for an hour. And if it doesn't, yeah, definitely put your little questions in the chat box, and hopefully it will be somewhat interactive, even if you don't want to show your face. We might just wait another minute or so and then we'll get started. But yeah, hopefully along the way, hopefully if there's any questions that arise, hopefully they get answered anyway. And if not, then we'll have some time at the end for questions anyway. All righty. All right, so if I go here, we can all still see my screen. Yeah, cool. No one has said otherwise, so let's start, shall we? Let me just double check this is off. Let me let her in. Okay. All right, guys, I reckon we should get started. So hello, it's the first little slide. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm an osteopath. I teach yoga and I teach anatomy to yoga teachers. So basically, hopefully you understand along the way that I'm really super passionate about educating yoga teachers better. Unfortunately, I think sometimes it's really the anatomy taught on yoga teacher trainings or throughout any of our trainings throughout as a yoga teacher. It can be quite rushed, and I think that can be really hard for us as yoga teachers to then be able to implement actually anything into a teaching practice, and that's where it can sometimes be really unsafe. So yeah, I'm really extra passionate about the nervous system too. So that's why I wanted to put this together today and yeah, teach a little bit about what I know. Okay, so basically the nervous system, if you don't want to answer me, that's totally fine. But in your own head, what I want you to think about is when you think of the nervous system or when I say nervous system, what comes to mind? So what do you think it controls? What do you think let me just get Kat in. Yeah, so what do you think it controls? What do you think it has to do with anything? Is there anyone that wants to put a little chat in? Or even if you think in your own head, what do you think of when I say the nervous system? All right, well, what shall we say? It is basically everything. So basically anything you just thought of, anything you were going to say to me. Oh, someone's put a little chat in. And let me see. Oh, hi, Kat. Hi.
Hi. Hi
Um,
there.
now I can't see my chat box. Sorry, guys. Hi, Kat and Lilies. Okay, it's you. Okay, that's fine. We can let you guys chat. Okay, so when I say the nervous system, it is basically a major controlling and communicating system of the body. So it monitors our environment, our thought, our action, our sensation, and emotion. So basically, literally everything that your body is doing at any point in time is controlled by the nervous system. So it's our mood, our fatigue, our sleep, our metabolism, our digestion, our pain, our hormones, our circulation, our movement. Basically anything is controlled by the nervous system. So that's why I'm so passionate about sharing about the nervous system, so that if we can use some of our yoga techniques to tap into the nervous system and have a better regulation or a better control of the nervous system, then we can literally impact each and every one of those things that I just spoke about. So that's going to have a great impact over your overall health. And if we want to know a little bit about the nervous system, what we can think about is we can start separating into little parts. So what I want you to start thinking about is this little picture here. And at the top here, we've got the brain, and then we've got a part of the spinal cord. So the orange part is called the central nervous system, which is obviously the brain and the spinal cord. So this is like our big CEO. So this is where everything comes into the body and into the brain or the spinal cord. And all the information that we will ever learn about or it will ever get deciphered or it sends messages. It's all to here. So without a brain or spinal cord, we basically wouldn't have a nervous system. So this is our big controller at the top, right? And then off that is we've got the peripheral nervous system, which is all the little blue parts that you can see here. So central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, and then peripheral nervous system is all the nerves that come down the upper limbs, the rib cage, down through the lower limbs as well. And this is basically our delivery, guys. So this is sending the messages back and forth from the brain. So it's like we touch something hot, the nerve gets sent up towards the brain, and the brain says, that's bad for you to have your hand on a hot plate. And it says, the brain says to the limb, you've got to move that. And then the limb does the action. So basically the brain's always telling you what to do, but the information is getting sent back and down through these blue parts on the upper and lower limb. And then if we jump back, so that's the central nervous system and then the peripheral nervous system. And then within the peripheral nervous system, that's separated into two parts. So we've got somatic nervous system, which is responsible for our voluntary movements, which are things that you're basically in control of. So you're in control of getting up right now, of staying seated, of lifting your right arm up, lifting your left arm up. What you're not in control of most of the time is what's in your autonomic nervous system, which is responsible for all the involuntary things that are happening right now. So involuntary things meaning your heart rate, your blood pressure, it's controlling your digestion. So maybe you've just had dinner, maybe you've just had brekkie and it's starting to digest all of that. So you're not sitting here and saying to your body, can you digest my lunch for me now? Or can you digest my dinner? It's just happening. The body's like, yeah, I've got this. I can do all these things for you. I can control your temperature. I can control your heart rate. I can control your blood pressure. And us as like conscious beings, we don't have to be here to tell it how or when to do that either. And so that part is then separated into two things called the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So that's heavily where we're going to spend a lot of talking about today. So you've probably heard about sympathetic and parasympathetic before. So the sympathetic is your fight or flight response, and then your parasympathetic is your rest and digest response. So fight or flight response, when I say it is regulated by, this is really important. It might go over your head now, but I want you to see if you can get the hang of it now, because then when we apply our yoga postures, you're going to have an understanding of why certain postures have an influence on certain parts of the nervous system. So fight or flight response is regulated by T1 to L3. So basically what that means is that T1 is sort of just in line with your shoulders. So the center point of the spine where it's in line with the shoulders. And then if you run all the way down to L3, that's basically where, like if you were to put your hands on your hips and then move your fingers in towards the center of the spine, that's L3-ish. Okay, so when I say the sympathetic nervous system or the fight or flight response is regulated by that, that means that that's where the sympathetic nervous system lives. So if we look at this little picture here, this is the brain, or like the back of the head, as if you're looking at the brain's up here. And what we've got here is basically this is where the neck would be, and then this is where the shoulders would be. And so we've got T1 all the way down to L3. And what you can see here, these little yellow lines on either side, is our fight or flight response, or our sympathetic ganglia. So it lives here. Okay, so basically like in line with your bra, and if you go up and down on top of that and then below that, that's where your fight or flight response is. All right. Then if we look at the flip side, where is your parasympathetic nervous system? So there's two different parts of the parasympathetic nervous system. We've got one, which is this yellow guy here, which is the vagus nerve. And then the second one is something called the pelvic splanchnic nerves, which are an organization of three different sort of parts that come together, and they're in our sacrum. So we've got our pelvis here, and then we've got that little triangular bone which slides inside the pelvis, and that's getting a bit technical, but it's separated into 5 spots. And if we think about where this nerve comes out of, it's from spot 2, 3, and 4. So basically in here, so the triangle part's here. So in the middle of the triangle is where the parasympathetic nervous system, so that rest and digest nervous system is. and it supplies things like our bladder and our uterus and our lower pelvic organs, whereas the vagus does literally everything else, all the way from here, all the organs down to here, down to the bottom. So this is the colon, and then the pelvic splanchnic does the rest. So basically, what does that all mean? It means that we've got the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, which lives in the middle of the back. And then all the nerves that are there are responsible for turning on our fight or flight response for all the organs in that area. And then our parasympathetic nervous system is either controlled by our vagus. So this nerve runs all the way from the base of the skull all the way down. It's the largest nerve of the body. And we'll talk heavily about vagus in a minute, but just for now, so you've got this picture of where it is. And then we've got the sacrum nerves, which are coming down here and supplying our lower parts of our organs. So basically, when you think about the nervous system, we'll keep going on about that, but just so you know now, a little bit of picture, and then we'll come back in a second. But when you think about the nervous system, I want you to think about this little seesaw here. So what's constantly happening is you're either in fight or flight, or you're in rest and digest. So you're either in sympathetic and your parasympathetic's not on, or you're coming to parasympathetic, and then therefore we can switch your sympathetic off. And so what I think about it is a lot of it's about getting that right balance, okay? And that's where our yoga practice comes into it. If we want to have a quick look at this guy here. So a greater picture of our vagus is what you can see. So hopefully you can all see this now. So we'll turn him off, but the yellow nerve here is the vagus nerve. So remember I said that it comes out through the base of the skull and then it comes all the way down and it tells the stomach what to do. So see how the nerve's coming all the way down to the stomach? In a second, we're going to see adding on the lungs. So it's telling the lungs what to do. So if we've got control over, or good control over this, over the vagus nerve, it means that we can have a control over all these organs which are here, because the nerve is coming down and it's telling all these organs what to do. Okay. And then if we jump here, okay, so let's talk about the sympathetic first. And some of you, if you've ever heard me teach before, I always say that I think the sympathetic nervous system gets a really bad rap, but at the end of the day, all it's doing is it's being activated in response to a stressful situation or a potential stressful situation that's triggering that fight or flight response. So the body thinks it's actually helping you because it sees something in your life, whether it be actually a physical stress. So say a tiger comes into your room right now, of course, we would hope that your sympathetic nervous system switches on. But what can also happen is the body doesn't have an understanding of whether it's the tiger in the room or whether it's a fight with your boss or a fight with your partner or even a story we're telling ourselves in our head that may not even be true. The body has no idea if that's actually a dangerous situation or not, like actually, or whatever. So it's going to say you're in a dangerous situation, whether it be just because your mind is creating this fabrication of this story, or if the tiger is actually in the room. So what it's going to do, it's going to increase your heart rate, your blood pressure. It's going to stop your digestion, your menstruation, all your hormonal stuff. It's going to be really affected. It's going to give you a heightened pain response. And really important, it's also your immune system's going to be suppressed here. But another really important thing to know, so that when we get to yoga in a moment, is that when you're in the sympathetic nervous system, your blood flow is going towards your limbs, so your upper and your lower body. And that's really beneficial because it's going to think we're going to get you out of harm's way. So again, it's not bad. It's just doing its job. And it's what it thinks is the appropriate response to have. If we then look at the parasympathetic nervous system, so this is where we think, oh, we always want to be. And yes, it's times during low stress and times of rest and when the body's calm and recovering. And this is when we're going to have a reduced heart rate, better digestion, better elimination, better hormonal response, better menstruation. But what's also going to happen is that there's going to be a reduction of blood flow towards the limbs, and it's going to be more towards the heart and lungs. And keep that in your mind for when we speak about yoga in a moment. But the other brilliant thing to note here is that this is where the healing happens. So you cannot heal your body from anything, whether it be physical or emotional trauma or, physical or emotional, unless you have some form of awareness over that parasympathetic nervous system. So good to point out there. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, please put them in the little chat. Otherwise, I will just keep talking and hopefully that we're all good and we're all staying onto track, on the right track. Okay, so if you're thinking, well, how can the nervous system control our muscles and what relationship does this have to do with anything? What I want you to have this awareness of is that your ability right now to be able to do a forward fold is going to be something, right? So say it's 90 degrees. Say you can lift your leg up towards the sky about 90 degrees, right? When you go under anesthetic or general anesthetic, your hamstrings will actually have full length of range. So regardless of what you have now, when you go under anesthetic, your leg can be lifted all the way up. And that's unfortunately sometimes what the surgeon will do if they need to get to some spot, they will lift the leg all the way up and they have the ability to do that. So what we can then recognize is that the anesthetic switches off some part of our nervous system, which tells it to that it's not under danger because that nervous system doesn't have the ability to regulate or control that movement from not happening. So what we want to be able to do is use yin yoga and other nervous system principles, which we're going to learn about today, to help you de-stress so that we can help you increase your length in your tissues, regardless of you like stretching or not. So a lot of it is because it's getting regulated by the brain. If we can work with the brain, you're going to therefore be able to move those tissues better, regardless of whether you've done actual physical yoga. Yes, we're going to pair it with physical yoga, but just know that if you're doing it with brain work as well, and breath and things, which we're going to talk about in a minute, that's going to help your muscles be able to actually create that length anyway. Okay, so why else would we want to be working on the nervous system? Purely for this big hormone here called cortisol. So it's obviously something I'm sure a word you've heard before, but not a lot of us maybe know what cortisol is. So I want to educate you that it's a stress hormone. It's produced by our adrenal glands, which are little glands which sit on top of the kidneys. The cortisol is important. So again, like I think we hear cortisol and we think we always want to lower it. Cortisol is actually really important to regulate our metabolism, control our blood pressure, reduce inflammation, support our immune system. And it's really essential for our life. But what happens is when we've got too much cortisol, when we're constantly in that fight or flight response, then that's when all of this goes out the window and it can't regulate our metabolism. It can't control our blood pressure. It increases our inflammation and it's really crappy for our immune system. So it doesn't help support that either. So if we can get more into the parasympathetic nervous system, we're going to have a better control of our cortisol. So studies show that you only need 18 minutes of yoga to actually lower your cortisol response and have a better impact on all those things that we just spoke about that cortisol does. But what I want to put here is I think it's really important just for you guys to even think about. There's no point in doing yoga just to do yoga. So what I mean by that is we don't want to get to the class and we've just like stressed ourselves out so much in that day just because we have to get to that class at the end of the day because we have to tick off our list that, yes, I've done yoga that day. And then when you actually get to class, like what's going on up here in our head? Because if we're in yoga, and we're thinking about our shopping list and our groceries and our food, and we've got to pick that kid up and we've got to do that and that work thing and all of that, you actually may as well have maybe just gone for a swim or gone to the beach or had 5 minutes of breath work at home or 5 minutes of yoga at home rather than rushing to a class just to say, oh, but I did yoga today. It's like, how actually are you showing up to yourselves on the mat? And is it more stressful to get there? So just food for thought, because I think I could be responsible for this too. So I'm sure that could resonate with you guys as well. Okay, so we've only got 18 minutes. Is there anything, actually should just pause there for a moment and just say, is there any questions or everything? Okay, anyone got any questions? No, I'll just keep talking and someone can interrupt me if something happens. Anyway, okay, so we've got 18 minutes. What are we going to do in our yoga? We are going to obviously do some form of breath work. So when we're breathing, what happens is it makes an unconscious activity. So remember before I said that when we're in our parasympathetic nervous system, it's everything that's unconscious. Oh, sorry, no, I should this picture here. So when we said this, our autonomic nervous system, it's unconscious. So again, remember I said you don't have to sit here and say, can you digest my dinner for me? It's just automatically happening. So same as your breath, because I've said breath now like 3 times, your breath might start to have changed because you're like, oh yeah, am I breathing and I'm aware of it? But generally speaking, it's unconscious. It's happening to keep you alive, and you're not having to control it. The other amazing thing is if you can see these 2 pictures here. So let's just look at the colored one for a moment. You can see where the heart is nestled in between the lungs on either side. And what's underneath here that the picture's cut off is the diaphragm. So we've got the diaphragm at the bottom, the heart's on the top, and then the lungs are either side of that. So if you're starting to slow down your breath and do this conscious control movement of the diaphragm and the lungs, what that starts to do is because the heart's centered in this is the heart is in the center of all of that, what that can start to do is slow down the pulse of the heart or the beat of the heart. And that's going to start to bring down that blood pressure and your heart rate as well, which is obviously going to have a better impact on your nervous system too. We've got stimulation of vagus nerve that happens when we're breathing, especially when we're breathing well with the diaphragm. So you always want to encourage, or if it's in your own practice, we're going to be breathing, but yes, we're breathing with the diaphragm. So slow, controlled breathing, focusing more on the longer exhales, which is going to stimulate that vagus nerve more. And remember before we said vagus nerve is the main nerve for that parasympathetic nervous system. So if we can get vagus nerve to be stimulated and activated, we're going to then start to increase that parasympathetic nervous system. And remember, if we go back to the seesaw image, if the parasympathetic nervous system goes up, the sympathetic has to go down. So the idea here is to just keep pushing the parasympathetic up, which naturally will force or gently force the sympathetic to come down. So there's also a ligament which wraps around from where the top of the diaphragm is. So in this little picture here, we might be able to see it just slide into here, or this little green part here on the colorful picture. So the diaphragm, this ligament wraps around through the heart and also the pleura of the lungs. So then it wraps around the outsides of the lungs too. So there's this full connection between all 3 of them. So if we're using our breathing to slow it down, we're going to then slow down that heart rate. So then if we look here at this little picture here, again, a little video. I just think this one just gives it a really good show of how the heart is nestled into the lungs. And obviously this part of the lungs cut out. We've got more just the airways in there. And then we've got the diaphragm, which sits on top here. So we can see that it's all nestled within one another. So if we can train this and this to slow down our breathing, it's going to have that impact on the heart, which is going to have a greater impact for the parasympathetic nervous system as well. Okay, so we've got 18 minutes to do some yoga. We're thinking, all right, we want to calm the nervous system down. We know we're going to do some breath work. The second thing you're going to do, or like at the end of the practice, I've just put it second here, that we're going to do some form of meditation or shavasana. You can also obviously do that at the start. So we know that a lot of studies show that it's going to reduce cortisol. The goal is to match the physical stillness that you're trying to create with the meditation or shavasana, and then to some form of mental stillness too. There's brain waves which are also changing. So we've got faster beta waves, which are more controlled without active thinking and more in times of stress. When we do things like meditation, our brain transitions to having more alpha waves, which means that we're more in a state of calm and we've got more of reduction of that mental chit chat that goes on. Okay. So we're going to breathe. We're going to do some meditation or shavasana, wherever that may be in the class. And then we're going to do some forward folds. So the fetal position, when you think about being in a forward fold, so let's take child's pose, that's going back into that fetal position. So you can see the baby here in the belly. We've got fetal position happening here, which means that this is our innate instinctual posture of safety. So this is where we've known to be safe before at one point in our life, okay? So if we return to that by turning inward and doing some form of forward fold, whether it be child's pose or a seated forward fold or Baddha Konasana, but seated, anything like that, what we're going to start to do is give you that more protection. The other thing that is fantastic is that when I wrote in, yeah, sorry, side note, just when I typed in fetal position to get pictures for this little photo came up here. So it's a great way to remember. I thought it was perfect that we've all been here on the grass with, that person's just having a complete moment. And that's where we know we can just tuck in and turn in, and that's where we're going to feel safe. And when we feel safe, our nervous system's going to feel more relaxed, and it's going to increase that parasympathetic and reduce that fight or flight response. The other great image to remember here is where the sympathetic nervous system was. So remember, we had the sympathetic nervous system sort of, if we've got the bra and we've got about this much above the bra and this much below the bra on the sides of the spine, that's where our fight or flight response lives. So that's where the ganglia are. So the nerves are all along there. So if you take something like fetal position, like the guys in here, the child's pose on the grass, what's he doing is he's starting to stretch out through those nerves. What he's actually doing is he's stretching out through the rib cage there. So if you've got fight or flight response happening, all those muscles are going to be really tight along that part of the spine, which you may also be able to resonate with. You might think when I'm really stressed, you get a lot of tension there. And so what that's doing is by being in something like child's pose or forward folding, is starting to open up the space between the ribs, which is going to get more of a release through the muscles there. And it's going to help switch off that tension through those nerves that run along that part of the spine too. Okay. The last thing that we're going to do is some inversions. Now, remember before we said that when we're in fight or flight response, all the blood flow is going to go towards the limbs. So meaning it goes towards the upper and lower body to help us to run. So when we're going to do some yoga, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to try to bring our blood flow back towards the heart and lungs, which is going to be more something that happens when we're in that rest and digest. The other thing, what happens is when the blood flow is rushing back or coming back towards the heart and the lungs, it puts little pressure, good pressure, on our certain receptors in our heart, which automatically tells the heart to reduce reduce the sympathetic overload and increase the parasympathetic. So just by doing the action of putting your arms in that position and your legs in that position, it's going to bring back the blood flow towards the heart and lungs and put this pressure on the receptors to initiate that nervous system to do what we want it to do. So this is a terrible picture here of the little inversion because this lady's doing like a core workout, but I could not find a picture online that where they're in like I think it's called dead bug, where your arms and your legs are both up. So commonly I see in an inversion, if I'm in a class and a teacher will say, lift their legs up, like to do the inversion. But I just think, why not stick the arms up too? And you're going to increase the flow that's coming back towards the heart and lungs. You don't have to do it like this girl is doing it. We want to just lift the arms up and just like relax through the elbows, rather than, this like straight arm. That's unnecessary. But again, I just couldn't find a better picture. The other thing that happens is when we do the act of physical stretching, we're releasing our endorphins, which endorphins are going to help reduce stress, relieve pain, and improve your general sense of overall well-being. So we're going to do some stretching. We're going to do breathing, meditation, shavasana, forward folding, inversions. All right. And that's going to be a really good structured class for yourself or your students. That's going to help impact their nervous system. If there's any questions, now is a good time. Otherwise, we're just going to keep moving on. So thanks for staying with me, guys. All right, I think we are good to keep going. Okay, so this is the brain. You're looking at the brain now from like an upside down position. This is like where the forehead would be, and this is where the back of the head is. So there's 12 different cranial nerves. You may have heard of these before, you may never have, and that's totally fine. So there's 12 of them. They all go off and do different things. They exit different parts of the skull and they control different parts of the face, the head and the neck. The big one in here is the vagus nerve, which is just this little guy in here. So this one here this is where it starts. This is where it lives. And then it turns all the way into this. So we spoke about vagus nerve before, and hopefully you know in your head, vagus nerve has a correlation with your parasympathetic nervous system. So it's the biggest nerve that's going to help switch you into that the rest and digest response. So we have to work out what are great ways to stimulate the vagus nerve. So if we stimulate it, hopefully you've got this picture in your head now. If we stimulate this nerve, it's going to increase your rest and digest part of your nervous system. That's going to have an effect on all these pink organs here. So every part here, all the way from the esophagus, all the way down to about a third of the large intestine, we're going to have an impact on. So it's like a lot of your body, obviously. So if we can stimulate vagus nerve, we're going to do things like our diaphragm breathing, but also ujjayi breathing, or humming, chanting, singing, laughing, or focusing on a slow exhale. So what's that doing? Or humming bee is the other, humming bee is the actual technical yoga breathing technique. So what's that doing? All of those things are stimulating the glottis, which is a muscular part of the back of the throat, which if we stimulate that vibration that we can create with things like chanting, singing, humming, laughing, you're stimulating that, and then that tells the vagus nerve to switch on. So brilliant with our breath, but we know that it's even more so brilliant to, switch this on with our breath, but even more so if you do things like ujjayi breathing, or that humming or chanting or singing and laughing. Okay. Just want to quickly talk a little bit more about breathing and the diaphragm, and then we're going to move on to something else. But what I want you to get the hang of is thinking about where the diaphragm actually lives. So if you think about it in this picture here on the right, in the rib cage, we've got removed all the other organs and it's just the diaphragm here. So what I commonly hear, and there's nothing wrong with this, don't think that you're doing something wrong, but what I commonly hear is that people talk about the breathing and they talk about belly breathing, which is fine. Like that's a great thing for the students to think of where it is. But if you actually look at where the diaphragm is, it's nestled in between that rib cage. So if you really want to get your students, or for your own practice, to breathe with the diaphragm, the best way to do that is to get them to increase the dimension of their lower rib cage. And so when I say dimension, I want you to think of a three-dimensional breath. So even if you pop your hands onto your lower ribs now and take a breath in, what you should be feeling, so if your hands are on your side of your ribs like this, what I want you to be feeling is that the ribs actually expand. So we want them to go like this. And then what we want to happen to the front is, yes, the belly's expanding, so the belly's moving forward, but also the lower ribs here, because they are attached to the lower ribs at the back. And so we still want the lower ribs to move this way, or the back of the ribs, I should say, the back of the lower ribs on the back. We want them to move like this. And then we want the side of the ribs to move like this, and then the front of the ribs to move like this. So it's a three-dimensional expansion of the breath. And that's going to have better energy expenditure and more connection again to that nervous system. So next time you're teaching, I want you to think, yes, I can say belly breathing, but I can also give the student that tactile awareness of actually where the diaphragm is, and get them to start to breathe in through their rib cage that way. Because there's no point introducing this to the poor students at some point when they're actually in a posture. Like say they're in, I don't know, even downward facing dog or something. It's going to be so hard for them to think about where their lower ribs are and how to actually move through their lower ribs. So a great way to do that is to do that at the start of the class, get their hands on the side of their ribs and actually get them to see those ribs moving, or feel those ribs moving. Yeah, so again, another little note here is if you see this little ligament which wraps around here, so we really want to make sure that we're getting that full breath happening through the diaphragm and also filling up through the lungs, because that's going to have that impact because the heart is nestled right in there too. Okay, the other little thing with breathing is that, remember we talked about, well, I'm doing a lot of talking. I talked about this picture here. So this is where the sympathetic nervous system ganglia is. So we've got it along the side of the spine there, remember, between just above and below the bra. So we've got it here and here. If we're doing things like, remember I said that forward fold, you're getting that expansion of the rib cage, which is helping soften all the tissues that can make this part really tight, which can increase the activation of that fight or flight response, which is not necessarily what we want. So what we can do is we can help by doing that full rib cage breathing. It's going to start to articulate and get some movement happening through the tissues here, so that rather than all the tissues being really tight there because our nervous system's switched on, if we get more rib cage movement with our breathing, it can start to switch off some of that sensitization here. Okay. All right. We're going to talk about pain in a second. Is there any, does anyone have any little questions or anything? Otherwise, we will talk about, cool. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Okay, so pain is the end result. Okay, it is perceived threat. Now, people that are in pain will often, which I completely understand, but this can be a little bit, what's the word? Maybe not rude, but abrupt to say that, it is in their head, but it's not like it's in their head like they're making it up, but it's the brain's perception of the threat or the danger. So the tissues themselves are never detecting the pain. It's what does the brain say is there. So it's your nervous system's job to detect that danger. But if your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response is really switched on, that's going to tell you that sometimes you're in too much pain or there's an inaccurate response. So I put a little picture of a snake here to remind me to tell you this story. So if you want to know any more about pain, there's a guy called Lorimer Mosley, and he's a neuroscientist and does amazing TED Talks about pain and the brain. But he tells a story, which I'll tell you a very short version of now, is that he was actually walking in the bush one day and he felt something against his leg. And his brain said, well, usually when you're walking in the bush, what it will be is a twig. So his brain sent the message down to the legs and said, keep walking, it's okay, it's probably just a twig. About a minute or two later, he ends up collapsing, and essentially it was a eastern brown snake that bit him, and he survived to tell the story afterwards. He survived, and then years later, he's walking in the bush again, and he felt something against his leg. And this time, his brain says, last time this happened, you almost died. Last time we were walking in the bush and you felt this sensation against your leg, you almost died. So what it does, it just increases his pain perception. So he was rolling on the floor, screaming that my leg sore, my leg, my leg, my leg. Anyway, his friend looked down at the leg and saw that there was a little twig that had just scraped his leg. And that's what it was. But to him, he was in extreme amounts of pain. And that's purely because his brain is saying, last time this happened, you almost died. So I need to give you this pain response to help get you out of danger. So why am I telling you this story? It's because it's a great way to show you that sometimes it doesn't give us the right signal, that pain doesn't give us the right signal. And a brilliant way we can help that is if it's ourselves or our students is by doing more nervous system practices, doing more practices of yoga. So breathing, meditation, forward fold, inversion, whatever else I said, humming, singing, chanting. So all those things are going to stimulate the great part of your nervous system. So we're helping to regulate it so that next time you're in the bush, or if you're ever in the bush, you're getting that appropriate response. Okay. The last thing I'm going to talk about today is heart rate variability. So if you're all still with me and there's no other questions, I will just keep going. Okay. So heart rate variability. You may have heard about heart rate variability before. If you do lots of exercise, you may have heard about it before, but otherwise some of you may never have heard about it before. Heart rate variability is different to just your heart rate, which we'll come to in a second. But what it is, it's a pattern of your rhythm of your heart rate. And what we want to see in this pattern is we want to see it to go up and down. So every time you breathe in, your heart rate should increase a little bit, and which gives you a little bit of a wave. And then as you exhale, you breathe out, your heart rate should drop a little bit. And so what's happening is every time you're breathing in and out, you're getting this wave-like rate of the variability of your breath, which is making it look like this. So lots of different variations here, which we're going to speak about in a second, but just so you've got the picture, as we're measuring the heart rate, we want it to go up and down, up and down, up and down. So what we ultimately want is adaptability, and we want a high heart rate variability. We want a low heart rate, which is going to mean that the beats aren't going like that. It means that there's an appropriate beat of the heart, but we want a high heart rate variability, meaning we want to be able to adapt to stress around us quickly. So meaning we want to go increase in our sympathetic nervous system when there's stress. And then we want, when there's no stress, we want to be able to switch off out of that. So stress, we want increase. No stress, we want the heart rate to be able to come back down. So think about it like, say, before when we said the tiger was in the room. Yes, sympathetic nervous system's on, but when you go home and there's no more tiger and you're safe, we want it to come back down. And so that means you've got really good heart rate variability and you are healthier overall. So they found that people that got low heart rate variability, meaning that it can't go up and down, it might stay up or it's erratic. So we can see here, that's good. So this, where it says coherence techniques, is good. And I'm going to teach you in a moment how to get to that with yoga. But when we see here how in the dreaming state or up and down, it's really erratic and not smooth. With those sorts of people, they're more likely to have, unfortunately, a premature mortality. So they might die younger, higher health risks, more things like diseases and disorders. So we want a really good heart rate variability so that we don't get many diseases and disorders, we have less health risks, and we live longer. So we want it to look like this, where it says coherence techniques. So what we can see is it goes up and down like a smooth wave-like structure. And the best way to do that, or the influences of this, are breathing, exercise, and our thoughts. So this is like just, I love this so much, and really hope you get something out of this evening. But what you can see here is there's such a difference between appreciation or the thought of gratitude and anger and frustration. So you can see how here the heart rate is going up and down, up and down. So the variability is beautiful, like a smooth wave. It's not erratic. Like if you look at the drama that's happening with anger or frustration, it's up and down and it's very erratic. So the best way we can influence our heart rate variability to make it look like it does in appreciation is through our thoughts, our exercise, and breathing. So we're rocking up to the yoga class, or you're teaching yoga if you're already teaching it. But unless we're aware of this, which is what I'm going to teach you now, we're only having like this amount of or a smaller amount of difference that we can have on the student or on our own practice if we're not aware of these little things. So you already might do some of these coherence techniques, which I'm going to teach you in a second, in your teaching. But if we tweak them slightly, we're going to have a greater impact on things like our heart rate variability, which is going to have a greater impact on things like, again, less health risks, less diseases and disorders, and we're going to live longer. So I think we all want some of that. So when we've got better heart coherence, we have better heart rate variability. So heart coherence is our optimal physiological state where our heart, our mind, our emotions are all synchronized. Okay, so heart, mind, and emotions all in sync means that we've got really good heart coherence. And if we've got really good heart coherence, we have really good heart rate variability. Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to get good heart coherence today, or things that you can implement in your yoga practice for good heart coherence, which then can impact our heart rate variability. Okay, so heart coherence, if we've got good heart coherence, so again, the brain or the heart, the mind, and our emotions are all in sync, all synchronized, we're going to have better emotions or better emotional stability, I should say. We're going to enhance mental function. It promotes our physical health and it has a greater impact on others. So the best way I can explain heart coherence is if you've ever spent time with someone or you walk into a room, and it might not necessarily because that person is your best friend or something, but you just leave and you think, I just feel really good after being around that person. Those people have good heart coherence. So their mental, their mind, their heart, their brain, it's all, and their emotions are all in sync. Okay. Which just gives you that good feeling when you spend time with them. And so we're going to learn how to give that to ourselves. So the best way we can be more coherent with our heart is heart-focused breathing, positive emotions, and mindfulness practices. So you might think, well, I already do breathing and I might already do some meditation or shavasana in my yoga teaching or in my own teaching. But I'm going to teach you a few little tricks to just change them a little bit so that we're going to bring more heart coherence into this. And then therefore we're going to have a better impact on this little graph here, which we know then means we've got better heart rate variability and we're going to live longer. We're going to have less issues with diseases, disorders, and we're going to feel better overall. Okay, so how are we going to have better heart coherence? 3 things I'm going to teach you. One is through breathing exercises. Yes, well, Sophie, we already do breathing exercises, but what I want you to pair them with is a word. So a physical word of gratitude, joy, peace, love, whatever. So it can be whatever resonates with you as a person. Or, if you're teaching to a big class, you can say, I want you to pick a word that resonates with you and makes you feel good. And so what you want them to do is every time they breathe in, you want them to think of this word. And then every time they breathe out, they think of that word or a similar word that's going to give them that great sense of heart coherence. So this is just next time you're teaching or next time you're doing your own practice, I really, really would love you to do this. If I had more time this evening, this is something I would have done with you all because you will feel the change. I want you to do it for at least 5 minutes or so, but you will feel the change within yourself. It's something you can do as a solo practice. So breathing in, you might just sit and do some breathing meditation. Every time you breathe in, you're going to think of love. And every time you're going to breathe out, you're going to think of gratitude or something you're grateful for. And you're going to feel that shift. Yes, it's because we're doing some breathing exercises, but also because we're starting to bring that heart, mind, emotions into that better heart coherence. So this is also something you can do with your partner or your child. So this is something in clinic I do with babies a lot of the time. So if you've had kids or you've seen children, when they're just absolutely losing it and something's not cohered, and if they're a little baby, obviously they can't communicate that with you. So, but they're just losing it, or you can see the mum comes in, the mum might bring the baby into the clinic and they're just not gelling, or the dad's in the room and he's not gelling with the baby, or the mum and the dad aren't gelling. This is something I will get them to do. So I want them to spend as much time with the kid or the baby or with each other. And you're going to pick a word and you're going to breathe in that word and you're going to breathe out that word. And over a few minutes or so, you'll feel the shift within themselves. You'll feel the shift within the room. And that what's that doing is you're actually starting to bring yourself into this. So that better heart coherence, the heart rate's going up, the heart rate's coming down, the heart rate's going up, the heart rate's going down. And what's happening with the family, if you're doing it with a family unit or with just one other person, is it's synchronizing together too. So if you're teaching to a big room, you've all probably have felt this if you do teach to a room which at least has a few people in it. You've all probably felt this and you felt like, oh, that just was a really good class today. Or everyone just was like breathing in and out together and everyone was cohered. It's that feeling. And if you want to all right, we want to get to that, you're going to bring in an emotional word that they're going to think about. The other way you can do this is you can experience the same thing. So we're going to breathe in and out, but you're going to get the student or yourself to focus on your heart. So you're going to think about the air coming into the heart and out of the heart. So that you're breathing into the chest and into the heart space, and you're breathing out of the chest and out of the heart space. And what you're going to do is for over 5 or so minutes, you're going to feel that change. The room will change and yourself will change. And what you're feeling is the heart, the mind, the emotions are all synchronizing towards that healthy heart coherence. Okay, there's just two others. So we've got variations of picking a gratitude or a word that makes us happy. We're going to be picking, maybe I'm going to breathe in towards the heart and out of the heart, and I'm just trying to synchronize the two together. Or there's meditations called loving kindness meditations, which if you've done a little bit of meditation practice, you may have heard before. So these meditations scientifically have been shown to increase that heart coherence and have that great impact on that heart rate variability. So the wave like of the heart rate coming up and the wave like of the heart rate coming down. So all you're doing is you can talk through the meditation yourself, or you might, if you're teaching, you might say to your students, we're going to say initially, hello, my beautiful mind. Hello, my precious heart. Hello, my miraculous body. So all you're doing is you're meeting your heart, your mind, and your body with that sense of gratitude. And that sort of that calmness, that peace, and that lovingness, and what that's starting to do, if that resonates with you, what that's starting to do is again shift you into that heart coherence space. So one of these might resonate with you. You might want to try all three. You're going to do them hopefully next time you practice on the mat. And if you want a little bit different variation, this is the one that I just put here. But if you want a different variation of the loving kindness meditations, you can look them up, and several will come up. And the last thing that studies also show that, like a yoga nidra body scan meditation, where you're saying right limb, left limb, big toe, relax the little toe on the left or whatever. When we're doing that, we're having that awareness of balancing through the parts of the body and doing that sort of yoga scan meditation, or yoga nidra meditation, or body scan, I should say. That's starting again to connect the brain and the heart together, and it's connecting through that right and left brain, and it is again improving that heart coherence. So hopefully you all understand when I say heart coherence, again, we want it to look like this picture here, where it's erratic. Yes, it's irregular, it's going up and down, but it's not erratic. And we've got this wave-like process that's happening. And when we can get this into our yoga practice, that's when it's going to change even more so than what you're already feeling on the mat yourself or when you're teaching. And great ways to do that, again, is that loving kindness meditation, the focusing on the heart as you're breathing in or out of the heart space. It might be focusing on a word that's going to bring you gratitude as you breathe in or out, or doing that yoga sort of nidra body scan as well. And so again, if you've got this little thing that's happening here, that up and down, that wave, what's starting to do is it's going to give you a high heart rate variability, which means you're less likely to get diseases, disorders, you're going to have better health risks, or lower health risks, I should say, and you're going to live longer. Okay? So are there any questions? All good? If not, but hopefully you guys got something out of that. I know that it's like late at night for some of us. So love this so much. You are the best. Oh, miss you. So yeah, thank you guys. Obviously, if you've got questions, you can ask them, but if not, you can always email me anytime, or however best you get in contact with me about any of this. But hopefully, if you've got a little bit of time next time you practice, next time you practice yoga, I want you to incorporate a little bit of especially the heart rate variability stuff, because that's when you can physically, tangibly see it change for yourself. And it's just a little tweaks to your yoga practice that you're already doing that's just going to make it just that little bit better. Okay. So if you haven't heard me talk before or done any of my courses, I do run online courses. So they're all up on my website. And because you've joined me this evening and I want to show my appreciation and gratitude, there will be a little discount, which I'll send you out tomorrow. So basically, this is like an hour snippet of a 30-hour course that is online that runs through head to toe of the whole body. This is obviously the nervous system, but we go through the muscular system, the skeletal system, the respiratory system, and injuries, modifications, alignment, blah, 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 all the rest of it. So if you want to know more, you'll get an email tomorrow, which you can pay attention to. But if not, yeah, I hope you got something from this evening. Thanks, guys. Thank you. You can log off, and if anyone's got questions, I'm happy to stay for a minute